Good afternoon and welcome to the University of Houston's Open Forum on the implementation of the Campus Carry Law. My name is Marcelyn Burke. I'm Associate Dean and an Associate Professor of Law here at the University of Houston Law Center. And I am also the chair of the Campus Carry Work Group. President Couture has charged the group with the responsibility of developing policies that are protective of the campus community's health, safety, and welfare, and that comply with this new law. The members of the work group represent a diverse group of constituencies. We have students, staff, and faculty members working together to draft this policy. I'm joined by two members of the committee here on stage, and there are others here on the front row and throughout the room. And so on stage to my far right, I have Donna Cornell, who is the Vice President for Legal Affairs and General Counsel of the University. And also on stage is Chief Caesar Moore, who's the Chief of the UH Police Department. So again, I'd like to thank all of you for being here today to discuss this very important topic. And before we open the floor to receive your comments, I'd like to give you some basic information about our timeline, itself, and then how you can help us. So Campus Carry, the law itself requires us to consult with students, staff, and faculty about the nature of the student population, specific safety considerations, and the uniqueness of the campus environment. We began soliciting feedback from the university community last month when we circulated a brief survey. We also invite all of you to send emails to campuscarry@uh.edu. We received more than 2,500 survey responses and many, many emails, and we have reviewed them all, and they are informing our work on this policy. We also held an open forum like this one last Thursday from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. And so again, today we're providing another opportunity for the campus community to provide their feedback. Our responsibility here is to draft a policy that is protective of the community and is compliant with law. It is not the work group's responsibility to debate the wisdom of the law. What we'd like to hear from you today is your ideas about how we can safely implement the law. For example, what areas or buildings on campus do you think should be excluded? And importantly, why do you think those buildings should be excluded? Another area in which we would appreciate feedback is whether or not we should have storage facilities on campus, and if so, where should they be? Now I'm going to go quickly through our timeline for this process. Under the law, we must establish any new rules by August 1st of 2016. So working backwards, we'll start with presenting a draft of this policy to President Couture and her cabinet in December for review. In January, we'll complete the draft, taking into account the input we received from her and her cabinet. And in February, we will circulate the draft to the campus community, including the shared governance bodies, and ask for feedback. We will also host more forums to receive input on the specifics of the draft. In March, we will revise the draft, having considered all the input we received, and submit it again to President Couture and her cabinet. In April, we will revise the draft further and finalize the policy. The new law requires us to submit the final policy to the UH System Board of Regents, and we plan to do so in May. Now, when the policy is ultimately finalized, it will be a part of the university's Manual of Administrative Policies and Procedures, which is also known as the MAP. And I'm looking around for Professor Snow. Are you here today? Not here today, but this will be a part of the usual process in which we go through the University Coordinating Commission and to turn this into actual policy of the university. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Donna Cornell, who will provide us an overview of the law, and then we'll get to hearing from you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I think Professor Burke has summarized it pretty well, but let me just read a few things from the law itself in terms of what the obligations are on the university. Obviously, we have to adopt a policy after the consultation with the students, faculty, and staff of the institution and take into this safety considerations that are unique to each campus. We will be looking at policies not just for this campus, but also for the other campuses that are part of the University of Houston, which include UH Sugar Land and Cinco Ranch. The law is very specific and says that we may not establish provisions that generally prohibit or have the effect of generally prohibiting license holders from carrying concealed handguns on campus. So a blanket prohibition of carrying of concealed handguns is not something that our policy can do. The provisions are subject to review and approval by our Board of Regents, who have the ability to make changes to any recommendations that are approved by the president. And lastly, we must, well, second to the last, we have to provide appropriate notice. There will be signs on every location that are defined in law that would be excluded, that would exclude the carrying of concealed handguns in those specific locations. So anybody that would walk into this space would have reasonable notice and understand that they would not be allowed to carry in those specific areas. And lastly, there's a provision with regard to storage, and the law provides that we may establish rules with regard to storage in dormitories or other residential facilities that are leased and operated by the institution. That's the basic summary of the law. I know that there will be some other things that come up. There is another law that was established at the same time as Senate Bill 11, and I encourage you to look on the Campus Carry website that we've actually posted a copy of the law. We've posted a copy of what's called a bill analysis, which is the legislature's analysis of what's included in the law. You can also see the fiscal note, which talks about the fiscal impact of the law, and there's other information that is in much more detail with regard to Senate Bill 11. And in fact, I think we also have posted the committee hearing or a link to the committee hearing where you can hear the testimony and the bill laid out by the author himself, him explaining, you know, what he was trying to accomplish and all the testimony that the legislature received when they were considering the law itself. So if you have any interest in looking at how it came to be and what the information that was considered at the time, that would be a great resource. But there is another law, as I said, that was passed at the same time. That was Senate Bill 273, which we also have on our website, that speaks to wrongful exclusion of concealed handgun license holders on the campus, so that basically prohibits us from wrongfully excluding concealed license handgun holders. And that will be relevant as we go through our discussion, I'm sure, today. But I just wanted to point out some of those things that we all have on our website, and those are additional resources for you.
Okay, and now for the procedures for this afternoon. We would like for you to limit your comments to 2 minutes each so that as many people as possible can be heard. Please begin your comments by stating your name and your affiliation with UH, whether it's student, faculty, neighbor, friend, staff, etc. And we will have Andy Moon from Staff Council who will be, or someone will be floating to let you know when you're coming close to your 2 minutes. We've got timers stationed at each microphone that will let you know when you're getting close to your 2 minutes. and we will turn off the mic if you go over the limit. Also, as I said, we want to have an opportunity to have as many people have an opportunity to speak, so we ask that you not line up to speak again until everyone who wants to speak has had an opportunity to do so. Okay, so let us begin. The floor is now open.
Good afternoon. I'm Suzanne Buck. I'm with the Communication Department. I'm faculty. You mentioned in the survey that you had approximately 2,500 responses. Is that correct? Yes. And there's approximately 45,000 people involved on campus. Do you think that some of that relates to the problems with the survey? People can take it as many times as they want. There are some issues with the survey and the questioning involved? Or is it just lack of interest? What do you contribute that to?
I really don't know why more people have not responded to the survey. You're right, we have a very large campus. We advertised this meeting last week and had one last week. And we're doing what we can. And last week we got some good ideas about how to get the word out further. And so we are doing that to publicize the issue more so that people will recognize that this is the time to speak up and be heard.
The survey itself was not designed as a scientific survey. It was more designed to provide and elicit feedback with regard to implementation of the law. It's pretty consistent with the way other institutions across the state have used the survey process.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Edwin Mascaro. I am the Senator for the College of Natural Sciences and Mathematics for the Student Government Association. I would like to begin saying I'm glad that we are having this meeting here so that people can be educated. And first and foremost, I am terribly disappointed, and especially with the faculty and staff and students that came here to discuss the merits of this bill. We are here for the implementation of the bill. Now that I've said that, I'm here to, I'm a strong proponent for this bill. When Texas State released their recommendations, I was very, very impressed. Those were pretty reasonable. And, is that time? You got a minute, 15 seconds. Okay, cool. So, one of the recommendations that I went through in each and every single recommendation, and I saw that what it could have been applied to the University of Houston. Number one, caps, and pretty reasonable. First floor of the Welcome Center, where it includes financial aid, registrar, and all of those, where students can be put in 10 situations. I've seen it, it's pretty reasonable. The daycare, I did not think of that. Indefinitely, over there where the police station is, Chief. Number three, the president's floor, E. Cullen, second floor, indefinitely, yes. The key one that stood out to me was the summer programs. My recommendation to the chair and to the entire committee is that we implement mobile signs for such events like this. That way, that if need be, that those signs are there in place so that CHL holders know that we need communication. And I believe that's going to be the key for this entire bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Audrey Colomb. I'm from the English department. And the first thing I'd like to do is see a show of hands for people here who do not feel comfortable with this bill, who are uncomfortable with getting guns in our classrooms. Thank you. I would like to see no guns in classrooms, no guns in faculty offices, particularly no guns in any staff offices where there's no protection from the public at all. Most of our staff are in offices where anybody can walk in, and I particularly worry about them. I worry about gatherings of this size. I don't know how you could handle that, but those are the three, absolutely: staff, faculty offices, and classrooms, where I think there should be no guns. As far as the gun safes, I guess, sure, pepper the landscape with those. Make people use them. I don't know how expensive that would be. My only hope would be that it would make it so expensive for the state that they would go back and change this law. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Vallow. I'm a student here at the University of Houston, as well as I'm a worker in two different, I guess, departments, you could say. I brought this up last time, but I'd like to see the committee, I guess, discuss it again. I'd like to see protections from discriminations against professors asking if students have CHLs or have firearms on their person. The next thing I'd like to discuss is an acceptable number of firearms and ammunition being allowed to be stored in the dorms. I don't believe storage is needed. Firearms are like alcohol for students who are of age. They're responsible for keeping it locked up and away from their roommates. And the next point I'd like to bring up is to limit the number of free spaces to prevent abuse of the fact that the law states that there can't be an essential ban, and to minimize the costs associated with having to install safes around campus. As well as I'd like to reiterate the point that communication is clear in establishing which areas are and aren't allowed for concealed carriers to have their firearm on their person.
Hi. Oh, that's
Hello.
weird. Hi, my name is Lizzie Bliss, and I'm a second-year graduate student at the GCSW. So I don't want them in classrooms, and I'd also say that I wouldn't want them in the building that facilitates CAPS, our Counseling and Psychological Services, and the Student Service Center, which I know is soon to be renamed eventually. My only concern is I don't know where we would put safes, and I don't have any other recommendations other than have been said already about classrooms and where our faculty and staff are. I would just hope and give the idea that within the policy of having these guns on campus, since it's going to be rolled out, that we put more effort towards our CAPS and provide better counselors and more access to this, and so that people know where it's at, and maybe, I don't know how to facilitate growth of that, but just make sure that students have a space to go and talk about their feelings and just have an outreach space, and of course not to allow guns into those areas as they might become troublesome. That's it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lauren Zentz. I'm an assistant professor in the English department. I think my main question is actually for the police chief. Assuming that concealed license, people who are licensed to carry guns are appropriately licensed in the first place, how are we or you going to be able to differentiate among people who are licensed to carry guns or not? I know that somebody without a license can walk onto this campus anyway and shoot people up if they want to, but is there any way to ensure that since the law is in place, people who have guns are appropriately licensed to do so?
Okay, I think you asked me two questions. The first question was whether or not, how do we tell the difference between someone who's licensed and who's not licensed when they're carrying a weapon? There would be a situation where the police would be involved and we would find a gun on the scene, and then there is protocol that the police department has in order to check to see whether or not someone has a valid license or not. There are licenses from other states that are appropriate and accepted in the state, and also some military situations where people can have weapons. So the officers have the ability to check whether or not the weapons are licensed or not. Someone asked a question about, I think it was the previous person, and it had to do about basically compiling a list of, or knowing who's has a license and who's not supposed to have a license, and a professor asking a question. The professors cannot ask questions about whether or not you have a license or not. And just like the police, we cannot ask just any person, do you have a license or not? It would be a situation where the police would be involved with the situation, where it would be appropriate for the police to ask the appropriate questions in order to do the investigation. Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Lacey Johnson. I direct the program in interdisciplinary arts here at the University of Houston. I want to see no guns on campus, and I know that we're not here to sort of argue about the merits of the law, but I want to tell you that many years ago, my life was threatened with a gun, and I've written about this in a book that the university was very proud to tout as having been written by one of its faculty members. But one of the things I write about in this book is the way in which women are particularly the victims of intimate partner violence. And I'm wondering how you plan to protect the rights of women against violence here on campus, and also how you plan to sort of negotiate how the rights of gun owners will supersede the rights of people, of women and people of color to, even though it's not necessarily a guaranteed right in the Constitution, I would hope that you would take a stand that we should not feel terrorized coming to work or coming to go to school. Do we have a right to feel protected against terror as we come to campus to do our business?
I think there are a couple of things that you asked about, and first I will say that sexual violence is obviously an issue of great concern across the country, and is certainly an issue that the university has been looking at in great depth on many different levels. And there are different things that have been implemented since we have heightened the level of scrutiny on sexual violence. The Department of Education issued its letter in 2011, and the university responded, I would say, immediately to the clarification, if you will, as it relates to sexual violence. The chancellor formed a task force. There are many different issues that have been rolled out as relating to sexual violence in Title IX. There are different things that have been done on the student programming side, different things from the Title IX office here on campus, from the LGBT Center, Resource Center, Women's Resource Center, and the like. It's certainly an issue of great concern to the chancellor, to me personally, and something that we are not immune to and think about all the time. As it relates to handguns, I'm not sure that our response is going to be different whether this law was implemented or not, because sexual violence and eradicating that in all situations is an issue for all of us and should be a very important issue for all of us. And whether we have the concealed handgun license law or not, I just don't see as determinative in one way or another on how we take, on what steps we take and how we interact. And so that's kind of how I would respond to that issue. But absolutely, I hear you. I think that the country has heard very clearly the concerns that women have, and men for that matter, across, in higher education on that issue. What was the other? I'm sorry, I got so
She
fixated.
talked about the rights.
It's like a really passionate issue for me, and so I'm sorry I get distracted about going to the next one.
She talked about the rights of women on campus, and also she mentioned being terrorized on campus as a result of this particular law. I'll go back to the women issue first. I'm a father of two girls, two women rather. They're always going to be my girls. So I'm very sensitive to how women are treated in the workplace, how women are treated in our society, because I want my daughters treated a certain way. And what I say to people who ask me questions such as you is I try to do the right thing all the time and ensure that no one's right is infringed upon, that no one mistreats anyone, especially as it applies to the law. The secondary comments that you made regarding the terrorism as a result of these weapons, it's more of a response to how you feel about the particular law, whether or not you think it's a good law or not. And again, the purpose of this forum is to discuss the implementation and not the merits of the law, whether or not we think the law was a good law or not.
Thank you. I appreciate that you want to do the right thing. I think the right thing to do would be to take a stand against this unjust law.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Xiaoping Cong, and associate professor from history department. Since we have been deprived from of rights to discuss this law, if we consulting with us, and so we can only talk about the implementation of this law. So let's talk about the implementation. And so my question is that in the condition that students do not put their gun into locker before the classroom, office, or whatever, the gun-free zone, and what we are going to do first. Second, that if later should we build up the metal detector to preventing student bring gun to classroom, where the money come from state or from state government or from university or from student tuition? Do students have to pay more, especially for those people who do not carry gun or against carry gun to campus? They have to pay for the price if the tuition increased, or state taxpayer for that amount of money. So this is my concern. Thank you very much.
As to the first part on whether or not we have an opportunity, you're correct. This forum is designed to discuss the implementation of the law. There are forums, well, not official forums, but when somebody has a concern about a law that was implemented, those concerns would be more appropriately directed to those that actually enact the legislation. That would be your elected officials. And those are the people that should hear from anyone who has concerns about a law that was passed. As it relates to the implementation and the costs that go with it, I will say that the fiscal note that you heard me refer to earlier, the Legislative Budget Board, which is the organization in Texas that makes the final determination on what the cost of a particular piece of legislation is, has said there would be no significant fiscal impact to the state, and does not provide specific funding as to each law that they implement. So what some of us say when we get new regulations, which happen all the time, is that's another unfunded mandate. What we typically do is we absorb the costs and expenses into an already stretched budget, and yes, you're correct. It would be nice to have funding specifically as related to the implementation of this law.
You also asked what would happen if someone does not follow the law. If there was a situation where we came across someone with a weapon and they were not in compliance with the law, we would arrest them. It would be a felony, and they would also be subject to the student disciplinary process.
Thank you.
How's everybody doing? My name is Sterling Dodd. I'm a student at Bauer, and I'm a student veteran. Who in here, a show of hands or claps or whatever, is a CHL holder and does not live in fear? Okay. All right, number one, first point, for all the faculty and the students, you will never know who's walking around you and has a gun and is a licensed carrier. You'll never know. Okay? I mean, there's a million of us in here. Are you afraid? Sure. There's plenty. We're not worried about you. All right. I have a solution.
Okay, let's, if
I
you
have a
could,
solution.
just direct your comments
Yes,
to
ma'am.
us, and then everyone will have their opportunity.
I have a
okay?
fiscal solution for your gun safes. Each student who wishes, the students we're all really worried about are the young students who live in the dorms, correct? If they want to carry or stow their weapons inside of their dorms, it should be required that they have a gun case, either by fingerprint or by finger combination, a small case. That's a requirement. We are worried about young men and young women who are unstable or who are under, mental duress because of their education. They should have a way to keep their weapons safe. Now, that, they will have to pay for them in order to keep them, but that will save the school a lot of money in terms of fiscal responsibility. So, that's all I gotta say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey there, everybody. My name is Jake Drake. I'm an undergraduate student here at the University of Houston. The first thing I want to talk about is safety, because that's the whole point of this. We're trying to have a constructive discussion on how to make this policy safe. I think the first thing that we need to worry about is large traffic areas like the student center, right? Those are places where if we think that we're going to be safer having concealed handguns, these are places that need to have the ability to like carry into, right? Because this is where there are mass number of students, and those are the big casualties that you want to prevent. You guys have ways of tracking down like the people who are going to commit crimes and in lower numbers, or like someone who goes off and shoots one person, right? That's a tragedy, but that's not something that CHL is really designed to prevent. So in that interest, I think for safety, we need to consider keeping guns maybe out of classrooms, but open to places like the theater where a large number of people can congregate. Going on to the second point, that's gonna be why we're all here, and that's education. And you know, it's hard to concentrate in a classroom if you do fear that someone might have a gun, and there's a lot of unstable people here. I appreciate what people have said about investing more in CAPS and having more psychiatric help on campus, because that can also help avoid a lot of these issues. If we're doing this for the point of safety, we just need to consider that you know, your staff is uncomfortable as well with this policy in a lot of aspects. A lot of people don't want students to possibly have guns, and there's a lot of reasons why kids can get mad at professors, and not everyone is very smart. People make irrational decisions. So if we're trying to stop irrational people, the best thing that we can do is to make sure we're putting these like potential CHL licensed people who know how to use guns, like the veterans here, in places, you know, student centers where people congregate and where we can stop them.
Thank you.
Okay, my name's Carl Littman. I'm in the Department of History, 26 years now, and I've seen a fair share of the sort of incidents that concern people with this law going forward. But since we're talking about implementation, I'll just state that I think we should, as the UT Faculty Senate called for, ban them from classrooms and personal offices. I think it's for a variety of reasons. People will disagree, but if you're asking people for their opinion, I think it's a way to potentially limit some of the risk. Second, I have friends who are at universities where they have concealed carry already. And in particular, the question of when is it no longer concealed, what do you do? So there are guns that show up when someone's in your office or in a classroom. What am I supposed to do if a gun is visible? What's the policy going to be about that? I'm certainly not going to inquire about their license status, but I think it's a real issue. The idea that they always stay hidden is a nice ideal, but I just don't think that's true. I think in practice it's far more complicated. And I don't wish to question the expertise of the gentleman who spoke, but the person I spoke to noticed a number of occasions where guns were visible. So my question would be, what are we going to do about that? What's the procedure going to be? How should I respond in a classroom or office when a gun is visible and I don't know whether or not it's a legal gun?
Okay, great questions, well spoken. We're looking at training from two aspects. We anticipate doing training about the law so that everyone understands what the law says. And then a secondary piece of training where we would train you about the protocols and what to do in situations like that. And we'll be doing some training for faculty, some training for students, so that people will know how this works and how the protocols are to be applied here on campus.
My hope and expectation is that we will have two policies, one that addresses the issues of where to carry and one that addresses how to carry. So it's very clear what those concealed handgun holders have, what they can do, where they can do it, and how they're supposed to interact, as well as how those that see something such as this would respond.
Great question.
Hello, my my name is Margaret Bauer. I'm an undergrad here. I'm a sophomore, and I live on campus. You mentioned training for not only the staff, but also for the police that we have on campus. And I wanted to share 2 stories with you. The first one was my very first my freshman year, my first semester here. I ended up at the engineering building pretty late at night, and I wanted an escort back. I pressed the light, never got one. I ended up waiting about 20 minutes, and then just decided it would just be easier for me to walk back. Then a few weeks later, I was coming back from a chemistry class, and I was stopped by a young man who asked me for directions. I gave him directions. He still wanted to talk. I was just trying to get back to my dorm room. Then he asked for my number. Tried to politely turn him down. Didn't take no for an answer. Didn't take the fact that I had a girlfriend for an answer. Ended up following me, and I ended up having to go to the library and wait. I think a major issue is police response time, because as we start to implement concealed carry, I think that the police will become more and more involved. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thanks.
My name is Michelle Angelides. I'm a student here. I'm also the mother of a student here. And my question is, since we have to register our cars to bring them on campus and park them, is there anything in the law that says that we can't require people who are going to carry a gun onto campus to register it with the university? That would be my first question. And my second is that, considering that there's no real cross-check between the mentally, people who have mental illnesses and obtaining a gun license, is that something that we can implement here on the university campus if we have licensed gun holders register with the university that they are licensed to carry, so that we could then see if they check into the clinic with mental illnesses, that we have some form of, warning that they may be in distress and possibly should not be carrying their weapon onto campus.
Okay, 2-part question, I think. The first part about collection of data regarding CHL holders, the answer to that is no. A similar example would be when you go to Walmart. Walmart does not collect data on who has CHL licenses when they go through. If an officer, and this is similar to a driver's license, if an officer encounters someone with a CHL or driver's license who is in a not good mental state or good physical state, there's a reporting process where you can go by to get that license removed if that's needed. So if an officer dealt with someone who was mentally ill on a particular scene who was a CHL holder, there is a process to deal with that.
And the law doesn't really allow us to impose additional requirements on concealed license holders.
Thank you, ma'am.
So my name is Weston Berry. I am also a student veteran, and I am an undergraduate student at the College of Architecture. I think we all know that a classroom can quickly become a place of tension, especially if you're not getting the grades that you want because you feel you're putting forth the effort, or whatever the case may be. So every situation can become a tense situation on campus. And honestly, I don't trust everybody who would be wielding a gun to be able to have that gun in a classroom. Also, being in the military, I feel like this would result in like a militarization of campus, meaning that things like RAs would need to be trained on how to react to a gun, because basically what RAs are at night is a barrier between the outside world and the dormitories. And so, again, people who say that they should have their guns in their dorm rooms, I could disagree. In the military, we don't keep our weapons in our dorm rooms. We keep them in an arms room. And you have to check out your weapon from an arms room. And so it's a very controlled environment. And the reason that is because you have the capacity to commit suicide in your room. And it's going to raise all these questions. I mean, it's getting to a very sticky situation to where, yeah, okay, I trust somebody, but not everybody who has a gun. You know what I mean? Who am I to judge whether someone's mentally competent enough to to handle a gun? Who is the state of Texas? Who is the United States? Who is anyone to say that someone is mentally competent enough to carry a gun? Because all it takes is one wrong situation for that person to snap and use it. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, my name is Richard Wormski, and I am a student since 1989. I'm a graduate of Bauer College of Business. I'm a 60% rated service-connected disabled veteran. My chief concern, having attended the university for a substantial amount of time, I've seen a lot of programs and initiatives implemented here. Some of them effectively, and some of them not so effectively. My current concern, given the fact that we have a fountain out there that has received little or no appropriate attention and implementation, and the fact that you can go just about anywhere on campus right now and witness active smoking. I would like to know how it is with the reputation at this point of successful implementation. What confidence can you give the university that you will give more attention to this policy and implementation than you do to those that generate revenue?
Want me to try that one?
I'll help you.
Okay, let me start with smoking. Enforcement of the smoking policy is not a function of the police department. So if there are people that are smoking on campus, my officers are not going to be snatching people's cigarettes out of their hands and their lighters. That's not going to happen. You asked what's the difference between, you used the parallel between the smoking and this. The implementation of this is a legal matter, and there's a criminal offense if you violate it, and the officers are sworn to do that. They're not sworn to stop people from smoking on campus. So that's one significant difference. The revenue issue, for me as the police chief, I'm not in a revenue-generating function. My function is to enforce the law and, to the best of my ability, keep people safe. That's what my job is. And the revenue issues are dealt with by the accountants and other people on campus, but my job is primarily to keep people safe and to enforce the law.
I'll just wrap up and conclude. I asked for what assurances you could give us. I did not ask for your job descriptions or the job descriptions of other people that are trying to implement their activities. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't have anything that passionate. Actually, I do.
Whoops.
Oh, gosh.
Careful.
Actually, I do have something that I am passionate about, and there is a lot of fear and a lot of unknowns with this new law, and there's nothing that we can do to take it back. We can protest and do all kinds of things, but there's nothing we can do to take it back. And there's been a lot of focus on the concealed handgun carriers versus those that are unstable. And my request is that if we're talking about tense situations where people are going to become emotional or going to become unstable, my recommendation is that we have more faculty and staff training on how to de-escalate situations before they get to that point. Also, how to identify people that are in distress. Some people gradually slide into distress, and some people snap. But if there is more education for the faculty and the staff, and even other students, especially the student body, because they have more interaction with each other than we do. And if there was a community-wide education on not only suicide prevention, but de-escalation, how to recognize those warning signs, then maybe our concealed handgun carriers won't have to react to defend us in the event that something happens. And maybe our faculty and staff that don't feel safe may feel empowered to advocate for those who are mentally ill and to protect themselves and their students. That's all.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I'm Lorraine Bradbury from Veteran Services. Coordinator of Veteran Services, I'm a staff member.
Thank you.
Thank you. Those are The de-escalation is a very important issue, and learning how to deal with folks that are disruptive in the workplace or in the educational setting, and that's absolutely going to be a piece of our implementation of this policy. So the policy itself is not where it stops. It absolutely includes training for folks to know how to recognize and respond to situations just like you described. That's a very good point. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Peggy Blake. I'm a faculty member in Communication Sciences and Disorders. One thing that I've noticed in listening to all this is it sounds like the students are being kind of demonized, and we're all afraid that students are going to snap and shoot us as faculty. I'm sorry about that. But I think I'm just hanging on to the comments of the person just before me. I appreciate that there will be training, and I do think that that does need to include students and not just faculty and staff. I don't think this is a problem where it should be us versus them. And I think that all of us need to be aware of situations and what we can do in those situations, like she said, so we can be empowered. I also would like to see self-defense training offered here, especially for women who feel threatened, and then for all of us who choose not to use our Second Amendment rights, but that we would be empowered through learning how to defend ourselves as we need it for any situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Devin Sanders, and I'm a sophomore here on campus. I do have a question. As a resident here, how would you protect the students that live in the dorms with a person that is carrying a gun, that has a gun, that feels unsafe with a gun? How will we as students be ensured in knowing that we can rest our heads at night while faculty and staff has exited the campus and we stay on campus? How will we bridge that gap?
Right. That's a very good question. I actually have a daughter who's a resident at one of our dorms here, and it's a question that I ask also. But as part of our considerations, when we look about places where guns are going to be allowed and not allowed by concealed handgun license holders, that's an issue that we're going to be addressing, and why we are looking at dorms, whether they will be included or excluded. And that's absolutely a consideration that will be taken into account. Thank you.
Hi, sorry. My name is San Juanita Gonzalez. I am an undergrad sophomore here at the university. I briefly reviewed the bill, and I read that it said certain areas would be excluded, such as daycares, as well as events where, school events are happening, locations. My question was first to confirm whether that applies here, which I'm assuming it does.
Yes.
And then second, my question was, what factors are you all using to determine which buildings are included and excluded from being able to carry concealed handguns, and what the police department, which is my third question, will do to monitor those buildings that aren't being protected and are susceptible to, I guess, incidents where there are shootings? So that's three
Could you repeat the last part of your question?
What the police department will do to monitor, such as the person who spoke before me, dorms and maybe any other buildings that are not implemented or are not covered in the campus carry. So for example, if the dorms allow for concealed handguns, or the UC or whatever, any other building, what you all will be doing to monitor those areas. I know there was someone who spoke earlier as well who said that they pushed an assistance button to be escorted and no one responded. So what will you all do to monitor the areas where students are, I guess, at risk for incidents such as these?
Okay, I'm going to start with the factors. What factors are being used for exclusion?
And inclusion as well.
The purpose of these meetings is to get feedback from the community to find out and determine what those factors would be for inclusion or exclusion. I'll give you an example of a place that will be excluded. We have one of the largest magnets in the United States here on campus, and it would not be wise to have a weapon taken into that room because the magnet would draw the weapon and require it to fire. So if there's a bona fide safety issue, certain laboratories, we're looking at what factors to consider for inclusion or exclusion. You've heard the faculty talk about staff offices, classrooms, caps, locations like that. So we're looking to determine what those factors are going to be. That's the purpose, that's one of the purposes of these meetings. You ask what the police are going to do to monitor or to adapt after this law goes, after the policy goes into effect. We need to see what the policy is going to be, and we'll make adjustments on the basis of that. We'll have to make adjustments for storage locations, security, cameras, and things of that nature. And then we'll have to adjust on the basis of the needs of the community. If there are certain areas that require more officers or whatnot because of this, then we'll do that.
I'm sorry, quick follow-up. So then if need be, then you will hire more personnel for?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
already looking to hire more officers specifically because to deal with the storage, I gotta have officers there, gotta have cameras,
Exactly.
gotta have alarms. I have to be able to do that if we're gonna have storage locations on campus because the CHL owners have the right to have their weapons stored safely and securely, and I have to make sure that I do that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Lauren Brozovich, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of English. I, like my colleague Audrey Colombe, who spoke, am against having guns, concealed handguns allowed in classrooms, in faculty offices, and in staff offices. I have thought at length about the problems that could arise in a classroom if concealed handguns were allowed in that space. In most classrooms in our department, they're small. I teach in a room in Cougar Village. There's only one door. There's no extra exit. If a concealed I am in charge of the room as the faculty member. If someone were to display a gun, I would call the police. That at least as things are in this time, if there was not an emergency phone that I could just lift the receiver, such as there are around the campus, the delay time is very dangerous for every student in the room if that person becomes a live shooter. In 60 seconds, how many shots could be fired? I will just say that I've thought about that situation. I've thought about the physical safety of my students, male and female, and I'm concerned.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Hi there, I'm Josh Baker. I'm a Marine veteran and a student, and my main concern is where we can conceal and where we can't. If we can't conceal, in classrooms or anything, is there an armory going to be open? How late? What's the hours for the armory and stuff like that? And then we need to make sure that we have access to those, our concealed handguns. Even if I'm a commuter as well, so during finals, I'm up here, till 1 o'clock in the morning at least. So, if we need to make sure that the hours are accessible, during times that students are here.
Thank you, sir. We had a discussion about this at the last meeting, and one of the presenters made a good point about having armories in locations where they could make it to class on time if they had to drop a weapon off. So again, I'm very sensitive to making sure that we meet the needs of the community, having appropriate storage locations and hours to make sure that we accommodate our population.
And one more thing.
Yes, sir.
So if the armory is not accessible, then our weapons end up getting left in, in a vehicle, which then, can become a weapon of opportunity if somebody, breaks into that said vehicle. And, according to state law, it has to be in a locked compartment within the vehicle. But even still, it's not going to take much to, break a few panels of plastic. So it makes more sense to allow CHL holders to carry in more places because that's the safest place rather than being in a vehicle where it can be accessed by somebody that doesn't need to have access to it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Hello, my name is James Cole. I'm a student here. I have a question in regards to housing. I live at Cullen Oaks, which is a privately owned apartment complex, but it's on campus. And you guys said that you're going to be implementing policies for the housing that the university is responsible for, how is it going to work for privately owned on-campus housing?
If it's owned, leased, or operated by the institution and located on the campus of the institution, then we would have control over it.
So you will have control over
Yes.
anything on campus?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Marshall MacArthur. I teach in modern and classical languages. I have looked at the law. I don't understand it, not being an attorney, but there are lots of, it is written in a pretty plain language, and I encourage everybody to read the law. The law mentions dormitories and residences, does not mention other places, so I'm assuming that you would interpret the law so that other storage facilities outside of dormitories could be established. That's one point I'd like to make.
Yes.
Second point is that the law actually does not mention creating any kind of task force or workforce. It does say that the president, and it's not just University of Houston, it's all the universities, the president will consult with faculty, staff, and students. And so in this case, obviously, President Couture can't do this all by herself. She needs a task force. But related to Professor Burke's comment about the survey, I do feel like with a large student body of 40,000 or so people, how can, to follow the law, how can President Couture actually consult with this large group of people? So I would suggest, I appreciate the fact that the notice of this meeting came up on Blackboard today because that was mentioned in the past session. But I'm really wondering, I guess it was mentioned that the survey was not meant to be scientific, so I would suggest that there's a clearer way over the next few months to incorporate the views of students so that there is true consultation, and I would suggest that there should be a scientific survey of some sort. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi. My name is Daniel. Hi. My name is Daniel Ha. I am a junior under the education department. I'm 1 year away from graduating to becoming a 4 through 8 English teacher. Thank you again for giving us this opportunity to actually, discuss the matter between both sides of this particular issue and about this law. If you'd be so kind, would you be able to humor me 2 particularly different comments? Okay. For the first one, I think there's a lot of misconception and maybe a bit of ambiguity about, concerning the law, especially when it comes to a university, since it is both a state-funded institution and as well as partially private as well. And so people are maybe unsure of how the law applies to necessarily state institutions as well as versus a private institution. And so when you're actually allowing campus carry, how exactly does the law more or less play into that? Is it necessarily because you are allowing just, a state-issued license in order to actually carry on just any sort of building that is not a federal building? Or is it more of the issue that, you're more or less granting us a permission to do so on campus?
The way the law was written was, it does differentiate between public institutions, and the University of Houston is a public institution by another law. And so we absolutely are considered a public institution, and this law applies to them. There is different pieces that would apply to private institutions, which we are not. And so the law would not apply in the same way between public and private institutions. And the entirety of the University of Houston is considered a public institution.
Okay. I figured that would be useful for people
Sure.
to have that clarified for them. The second issue is there seems to be a lot of whoever is not concealed carrying, or whoever is concealed carrying is suddenly the enemy, or, it's us versus them. And I would like to speak to both my audience and to all of you, if you wouldn't mind. 5 seconds? Okay. I just finished a 10-page paper concerning believing in the infinite potential of all of my students, and by extension, my peers, my administrators, and as well as everybody else. Me, who believes in the infinite potential of every human being that I come across, am not your enemy. So when you're worried about, as a concealed handgun carrier, like, I just want you to understand, there's human beings behind that gun, and it's not necessarily like an enemy. It's not somebody else. It's just it's your neighbor. It's somebody else who cares about your kids. So, I mean, I just wanted to get that out of the way. I'm sorry for that.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Danny Arocha, alumni, and I also work for the Conrad Hilton College. There's a lot of people here. First of all, just for the record, I think this is the worst law that ever passed this Texas legislature. And I say that for a lot of reasons, but where were the presidents and the chancellors and the Board of Regents when this law was being passed in Austin?
I will.
Let me finish. Second of all, there's a time and a place for everything, and we all have our rights, and I believe in the Second Amendment just like anybody else. But I recruit for this institution, and when I'm out talking to a junior or a senior in the living room of a parent, and they always ask, is the University of Houston safe? And I always look at them and say, yes, it is, because my daughter will be a senior, will be a student here in 2 years, and I'm sending her here. But, it's just going to take one incident, where we have a mass shooting in the cafeteria, or something like that. And now this is a law that will be taken into place in August. And what frightens me as a staff member, as does the faculty, is that if a student is not admitted, and they knew that I was the one that didn't admit them, and they decide to come into my office and blow me away, and the only thing I have to pull out is a ballpoint pen, yeah, this has really, really got me thinking about there might be another career path for me, because I do not want to be in a military zone on a public institution. Thank you.
Yeah, the chancellors and presidents across the state were pretty vocal in their opposition to this legislation. I think that's pretty well established if you go back and look at the history.
Thank you.
My name is Kia Johnson. I'm a Communication Sciences and Disorders Associate Professor. I am the wife of a federal law enforcement officer. I'm the daughter of a inner city police officer. So to be clear, I am not fearful of guns. We have them in our house. I am a multiple gun owner, and my husband as well. However, as a professor, I have an issue with guns in the classroom, as been stated. And I think we need to be clear on making that decision that they should not be in there for two reasons. One, I'm a speech language pathologist. I teach courses that will basically educate our future clinicians. I like to provide students opportunity to bring in community members, for parents to bring in their kids, to be able to have practical hands-on experiences in the classroom. I am really hesitant to ask a parent, bring your child in, if I don't know what guns are in my classroom. And I really think we need to think about the policy. Sir, don't remember your name, but in thinking about the policies, you said that if there was someone unstable that you heard of had a gun, you would go to that person and do whatever you are able to do as a law enforcement officer. But if we as the professors are not able to ask those questions, unstable student or faculty is in the classroom. We can't ask them about their concealed license. They're unstable. They go to CAPS without their gun. They're unstable. If no one in that process can ask, how do you get that information of who's unstable and has a gun? So we really need to think about that. If you look at universities who have had issues, I'm sure on paper the policy made sense. but we really need to look through the policies and make sure that there are no gaps that are not being addressed. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Whitney Cox. I'm an adjunct in the Religious Studies and Women's Gender Sexuality Studies department. So I understand being shouted down by students. But as an adjunct, I have no job security. I don't even have an office. And when this is my first full semester teaching here, and I love it, but it has very much been learning by doing and a lot of trying to swim just by being thrown into the deep end. So can I please ask that regardless of what happens and what decisions are made and what training is mandated, please make sure that it comes to and through us adjuncts, because very often we feel very unsupported. I'm hearing adjunct applause, thank you. And this is not a small thing. Our jobs are insecure enough as it is, and I would like not to be left with any ambiguity on something as serious as the protocol for dealing with an armed student, regardless of the student's intentions or legality. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kareem Sobe, and I'm a freshman at the University of Houston. And I just kind of feel like knowing that people have a gun on campus, to me, it doesn't really create a safe environment. And kind of a question for the police department. You said you're gonna do your best to enforce the laws to create a safe environment. But if you know that people have guns on campus, do you really think we have a safe environment in general? It's just a general type question.
I think that whenever you have a gun involved in a particular situation, I'm not talking about just having a gun on your person. Whenever you have a gun in a situation, it creates a more dangerous situation because the gun is involved in a situation. I'll make sure I'm clear. I'm not talking about just having a gun on your person. I'm talking about that gun being involved with the person that's involved with the situation. Again, my position on this panel right now is to enforce the law and ensure that we put the appropriate policies in place. Debating the merits of whether or not I think it's a good law this is not the venue for that, because as Donna Cornell stated earlier, the position of the police, the position of chancellors around the state, presidents around the state was made clear while the law was being developed. I had input to the state about what I thought should happen, and in the wisdom of our legislators, this is the law that we have, and now it's my job to make sure that we enforce the law and then we put appropriate measures in place to implement it here on campus.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Sean Minnick, first-year student here, proud reservist. First off, I'd like to go and say I'm glad we're having this meeting. Personally, I'm glad the law passed.
Okay.
Secondly, I don't think it should be an issue as a service member. I feel totally comfortable with my firearm. Suggestions I have regarding the housing and whatnot, you can't necessarily ask straight up, hey, are you a CHL? But you can ask, are you comfortable living with one? You can put that in the housing applications and whatnot, and those who aren't, put them on a different floor in a different building. We have 2 towers for Moody Towers. We have 2 Cougar Villages. Make one guns free if you have to. Second off, one of the speakers mentioned the students provide their own gun safes. They're $40 on Amazon for a good one that's fireproof. Okay. Second off, I just want to address this one to the public, everyone here who's against. Personally, I carry a Taurus PT 111 that fits in the small of my bag, just enough you will never know I have it. Any gun crime, that is 9 times out of 10 when a gun-related crime is committed, that person is already not supposed to have that firearm there. They're going to have it regardless of the law if they intend to do harm. Personally, being as a reservist and I work in private security as an armed officer, I see that, I'm going to drop them within 5 seconds. Okay? Thusly, for those of you who think it's not concerned? Okay. When you go to get your CHL, you undergo very strenuous testing. You have to qualify for your range qualifications, and they do say, okay, is this person fit or not? Am I wrong, Chief?
You're correct.
Thank you. One more thing, law enforcement-wise. Yes, ma'am. Someone mentioned earlier police response. I very rarely see police here. The first time I saw a cop on this campus was the first home game we had. That's because I called them because someone fell and busted their face. Second, every security officer who is not a cop on campus is unarmed, correct?
Correct.
Will you be considering arming them and hiring level 3 commissioned officers?
That is a discussion that we're having internally about whether or not we want to arm our security officers.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Aaron Patton. I'm a student here, and I'm also in the Marine Corps Reserve. I just wanted to say, I got my concealed carry in order to protect myself and my family. So in these areas that you're saying I no longer could protect myself, whether it's a classroom or something else, how do y'all plan on going about making sure that I still feel safe in these places? Because a criminal's not going to see a classroom and be like, oh, I can't carry my gun in here. If you're planning on walking in to shoot up a building, one more thing's not going to stop you. How are y'all going to provide my safety when I'm not allowed to?
Great question. We work tirelessly to make sure that we investigate all crimes on campus and do a good job of making sure that the bad guys know that this is not a place to be. One of the biggest things that police can do to make sure that they decrease the number of crimes in a particular location is to be seen as a viable force and a place that crooks know that if they come there and they commit a crime, that it's not a place to be. We do not want to be a soft target. We will venture away from the campus to make arrests if we need be. We have an aggressive investigative unit, and I'm working hard to train our officers even better because we're going to have to adjust once this law goes into place because, again, once the policy is put in place, then I will have to figure out what that means for us. I talk to my staff about that a lot, what that means for us when it comes to providing safety on campus because my job is not only to deal with crime, but also fear of crime, and I don't want anyone to be fearful of crime on campus. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Martha Dunkelberger, another person from Communication Sciences and Disorders. We're taking over. I have 2 points. The first is that we have a peers system on campus, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
There was an alarm at Agnes Arnold today that went off for 20 minutes. I looked at the Twitter account. I looked at the emergency management account. Nothing. First, I thought it was a tornado warning, so I ushered all the students down into the basement and into the classrooms. Then I found out through the announcement that it was a fire alarm, so I ushered them back outside into the rain. I still don't know what was going on there. And I find that a little bit frustrating and a little nerve-wracking when we're talking about police response. I think that's an important thing to consider. The second thing I'd like to say is that I've heard a lot of people talking that there's nothing we can do about this law. And there's nothing we can do about this law right now. But we can vote. And I hope that each one of you who is opposed to this voted in the last election, an election before, and will be voting in the next one coming up. And I also would encourage people to be paying attention to the peaceful protests that are being planned on the UT campus and paying attention to the kinds of information that's been going on at the private universities and how the private universities have made decisions to not allow campus carry on their campuses. And I think we need to pay attention to other ways to make our feelings known, including getting to the ballot box.
Hi, my name is Katarina.
Let me come in before you start. The young lady talked about a fire alarm going off for 20 minutes and then police response. And then she mentioned the peer alert system looking for a message. The peer alert system is used for 3 reasons. One is an emergency message. An example would be if there's an active shooter on campus, the dispatcher doesn't filter the information. She puts that information out right away. So if there was an active shooter in the wellness center, somebody calls the dispatcher puts that information out at that moment. Then there's a security message. If there's an impending, ongoing, immediate threat to the campus, then we will put out an alert. The police department typically does that. You'll see those in the cases of a robbery, where the robber is still at large in the area. We will put out an alert in those situations. And then the last type is a traffic alert or weather alert. And the police department puts those out, emergency management puts those out. But the peer system, which is going away soon, is not meant to address fire alarms and things of that nature. I wish someone was from the fire department was up here because they could respond better to what their protocols are when it comes to a fire alarm. But I do appreciate the fact that something was going on in your building and you needed some information about what was happening so you could make a good decision. So I'll talk to my staff and we'll follow up and get back with you with some information in the very near future. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Katarina Irwin. I'm a freshman here on campus, and I also live in the residence halls. So I wasn't raised with guns. I know there are a lot of people who weren't, even though we live in Texas. So guns scare me a lot. And I know perhaps if I got the training or something, I wouldn't be so scared, but I'm not willing to do that. So because I live on campus, that's my home, my room, my floor, the lounge, everywhere. That's my home, and I want to feel comfortable there. And I'm afraid next year, if there are guns in dorms, I won't feel comfortable. And the second point I have to make is people who are saying that their concern is with mass shooters, but statistically, people are more likely to be shot when there's just an escalated situation and they happen to have a gun and they use it. So it's not mass shooters and trying to protect yourself from mass shooters. It's when there's a situation that has escalated.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nathan Willanen. I'm a junior pursuing a degree in mechanical engineering here. I'm also a veteran. I served 7 years in active duty and I'm in my 3rd year of National Guard service with the Texas Army National Guard. I've gone to war for this country 3 times. Thankfully, each time I was able to make it back in one piece. It is unimaginable to me that after all the combat I've seen, that I must be defenseless here at school, and that we're even having a conversation about having areas where I have to be defenseless at school. The world we live in is a rough place right now. To deny that is to ensure that there are many more deaths when an attack occurs, if an attack occurs. Whether it is Islamic extremism or a disturbed student, the pain that they inflict is the same and similarly preventable. Imagine if somebody walked into this auditorium right now, through that door, or into one of your classes that you were in today, with a gun, with a rifle, with a pistol. What would you do? Do you have any means to defend yourself? I know, me personally, I would be praying to God that somebody was breaking the law and carrying a concealed handgun so that they could shoot that guy before he shoots me and takes me away from my family and my kids. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but that's how I feel about it. In 10 seconds, somebody can execute well over a dozen people. And what are you going to do? With training, you can draw and fire a concealed handgun in 1 to 2 seconds and end that threat, or at least stop them from executing people. People want to talk about concealed carriers as the enemy, as concealed carriers are criminals. Concealed carriers are the most law-abiding people in our society. And Chief, you know this to be a fact, that CHO holders commit crimes, especially violent crimes, at a significantly reduced rate compared to the general population. So everyone's fears about CHO holders are completely unfounded, first of all, and by not having people around with guns, all you're doing is making it better and easier for bad people to come and hurt everybody, kill everybody. It doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
Thank you for your service. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Dr. Simmons, Veronica Simmons. I'm the chief pharmacist at the health center here on campus.
Okay.
And I myself am a concealed handgun license holder. My husband, my son, teenager, knows how to use a gun, but that in itself is not what makes me feel safe. I would feel safer if this law had not been passed, but since it has, I do, what I remember in taking the class, one of the things pointed out in the video was even the most trained person doesn't always make the most rational decision in an active situation. So that's what stood out to me. I wouldn't trust, even myself, being trained sometime to make the right choice in an active situation. So I do support training of students, faculty, staff in an active shooter situation ongoing. I mean, we're gonna have new students, new staff, so I believe if you implement any type of training, it needs to be ongoing refreshers. Also, I support CAPS saying increase counseling. We're gonna have to have counseling for people dealing with this being on campus, as well as students who may need a support. And we have to actively and proactively reach out to the students, not just expect maybe them to come, but really have some type of campaign to actively reach out to students for counseling and a support service they may need. Myself in the pharmacy, I fought almost a year to get my back door locked in the health center. We had to wait till it rolled around on the campus police radar, whoever installed Plan Ops, but I was emailing trying to get my back door locked because I saw that as a way somebody can just run in, smash and grab, is what happens in the outside world in pharmacies. I personally owned a pharmacy that was burglarized, so I'm familiar with that. So this was before campus carry. I wanted my back door locked because the pharmacy's in the back of the clinic. And now here we have guns. So I would support more panic buttons, maybe in key areas. I think a person mentioned about will there be detectors. I don't think that was answered. I didn't hear whether there were going to be metal detectors in buildings that were excluded. And if so, will there be, training of staff of what to do if the detector goes off, or will there be active security office armed in that area to deal with situations? Those are things I would like to know.
Well, some of the questions I can't answer because we haven't made a determinations about which buildings would be off limits or not, and the number of buildings. So again, until we put the policy in place and I see what it looks like, then I can make some decisions about what it means for us as far as implementation. Yeah. But thank you, good points.
Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Doshin. I'm a student here at Bauer.
Okay.
I'm a survivor of an armed robbery, and I've got to say that I am not the least bit afraid of CHL holders as a generalization. And anybody that is a licensed holder, thank you for going through that training and making your carrying of a gun very well documented. I'm not worried about that. So a point that I'd like to ask you, and then I have a comment. You said that we cannot ask somebody just straight out, a professor can't address the whole class and say, who here is legally licensed to have a handgun? Are we allowed to ask if weapons are present in the classroom?
I would probably argue, I'd have to think about that. I'd probably answer the question the same way the chief did. No.
Okay, so we can't ask, hey, is anybody carrying a gun? Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that. Thank you. So as I said, not worried about those that are licensed and really just trying to do the right thing. They've gone through a process that was lengthy and at their own expense. What I'm worried about is I have siblings and I have a daughter, and anybody that grew up with siblings or that has multiple children knows that when you give one of them something, the other one is going to want too. So for For the students and faculty that are licensed to carry, I know there'll be people that say, or there'll be non-licensed people that say, well, they can, so I will. And I just ask, my recommendation is that we really put a strong focus into proactive solutions, because reporting is great, but that is reactive, and understand that you're bound by certain terms. But proactive solutions, metal detectors or whatever else, is going to be the key to allaying some of these fears. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Tyler Green. I'm a philosophy student here at the University of Houston. And I have some comments and 2 questions. But first, my comments were, I'm having really a hard time understanding how this law stands to make me safer, just because I just feel when you add guns to a relatively safe situation already, I just don't understand how that equates to safety at all. I don't get it. Another thing, if something were to happen on this campus as a result of a weapon, I just find it weird that the only way that I could have prevented that was to have carried a concealed weapon, because I conscientiously put myself in a situation not to be around weapons at any time. I conscientiously put myself in situations to where I wouldn't have to deal with facing a loaded gun. So to say that now my only option is to either deal with what happens or carry a gun is troubling to me, and it's scary. My first question, though, was in regards to the armories. I know that we wouldn't just have, lockers with being unmonitored with weapons inside them, and you mentioned that there might be cameras or guards in place. I just wanted to know if we could feel safe knowing that there's an armory on campus, because I feel as though that would make it more unsafe, because now the outside world knows that there are, in fact, weapons stored on campus. So I was just wondering if there is any way possible that we can be secure in knowing that those weapons would be completely safe. The second question was, we addressed densely populated areas. I just wanted to know, is there a way in which the police department will monitor sparsely populated areas like the second floor of McElhaney Hall or the various floors of Agnes Arnold Hall, where there are not necessarily large groups of students, but where at any time a shooting case could take place? Thank you.
A couple of responses. The first question was about the safety of armories and how it impacts how people feel about the campus. If we're going to have areas that are cold zones where people cannot carry weapons, then we have to have an ability to store those weapons. And you talked about the safety and security of those weapons. That's why we're going to have to hire officers, alarms, things of that nature to make sure that those weapons are secure at all times, because I can't have a venue that's not secured with weapons there. So that's my response to that. Then you talked about sparsely covered areas or limited access. And one of the projects that we're working on is we're working on a camera enhancement project that has some smart technology. So the Reader's Digest version would be, if there was a sparsely covered area, and if there was some unroutine activity occurring in that area, we would actually get alarms sent to the police department that could we respond to on the basis of those alarms. Also, I'm looking at enhancing our VPR, which is our video patrol unit, to add another person to that in order to monitor these cameras. And we're also putting an umbrella of license plate reading cameras around the entire campus to make sure that we know who's here, when they're coming, and when they're going. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Garrett Clark. I'm a freshman here on campus. And I was wondering, I know y'all said that professors can't ask who has a concealed carry permit, but can the university compile a list from the known list of people with concealed carry licenses?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm an undergraduate student here.
What's your name, sir?
Michael. One of the questions I was going to ask was already asked while I was waiting. So I just want to say that as far as policies and implementing this, I really think that it's important for the administration to focus on psychological health services for students, because like at a university, it's already a high-stress environment by its nature. And I mean, adding guns into the mix is obviously a very bad idea, but I don't need to get into that. I just want to ask that, like, can we get assured that there will be expanded advertising for awareness that we have great psychological counseling services here first? Because I mean, it's just, I don't have a problem so much with guns as much as the people that carry guns, and a lot of people that carry, not everybody, I mean, this isn't a total generalization, but some of the people that carry guns have like hero complexes and are just really waiting to get their moment to fire their gun. So, it's just, my concern is just about like making sure that people that have these kinds of mental instabilities are made aware that there are services for them where they can go and get mental help. And like people that, if there's anybody that seriously lives in constant fear that you're about to be attacked by a terrorist or something like that, there is psychological help for you on campus. You don't have to live under that kind of paranoia. So I would just like to ask for like some assurance that like there will be expanded psychological health services and more awareness that those are available.
Part of the implementation of the law and the training will absolutely include, so that everybody that has to deal with these kinds of issues, students, faculty, and staff, know where the resources are on this campus.
I have received the psychological services request very well. I've heard that from several persons, and I've received that message.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Hannah Mathams, and I just wanted to, I guess more than anything, give a charge to you, Chief, and the staff at University of Houston. When you're thinking about the policy that's to be implemented here, I want you to think about some very key aspects of what the consequences of this law would be. And the first is that I've heard a lot of fear about guns themselves, how they're weapons of mass destruction, and just there's a lot of fear about guns in and of themselves. And I would just encourage you to look critically at, is it really a gun issue or is it the person behind the gun? And I would also ask that you consider other weapons, knives. Anything can be used as a weapon these days, and they can be more concealable than guns as well. So when you're thinking about this policy, I would just ask that you look to history and see how in history, slowly taking away people's rights to carry guns has only led in more and more death, more and more violence. And I would encourage you to look at the statistics, look at just history. Statistics aside, history proves Switzerland is the most I guess you could say, has the least amount of gun laws, basically none, virtually none, because every citizen has a gun, and they have the lowest crime rate of all nations. Whereas Chicago has the most restrictive gun laws, and I just hate for University of Houston to become like Chicago in the rate of violence. And so I'm just asking you to please, please consider the consequences of these ideas. And when you're thinking about this policy and how to implement it, just consider that it's not really a gun issue, it's really the person behind the gun, and how guns are not the issue. It's what those people do with those guns, and if someone's going to come in and start shooting up a classroom, they're going to do it whether or not you put a restriction. Okay, criminals don't abide by laws. That's their nature. So if you say this is a gun-free zone, then that gives the criminal an open door to just come and do whatever they want. And that's been happening on university campuses, which are predominantly gun-free zones, and also at sporting events, which are gun-free zones. So just look at the history, look at the facts, and consider your choice very wisely for our safety. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ryan. I'm a first-year student here. So I think with where guns should be restricted, for example, like the Republican debate that's coming up. Now, I know the law won't be implemented until after that, but with things like that, with political things and stuff like that, it probably not a
It
good
won't be any
idea.
guns at the debate, I can tell you that.
I figured. That's a given. But also at the stadium during football games, probably not a good idea either because both teams are there and sometimes people go crazy. Other than that, it's I'm for it. So definitely. Also with the safes and keeping our guns in the safes, people with concealed carry licenses, they get like background checks, they get mental checks, they get all this stuff. So, if we do it on campus as well, it's fine. But you should also try to make sure people know when you put your gun in the safe that the clip is not in the gun and it's like not loaded. So it's hard to get to it so that people can't like try to harm somebody like that. So, yeah.
Well, I understand we will be diligent in developing the protocols for gun storage because it has to be safe while the person is storing the gun, safe for the people that are working there, and we have to make sure that those guns are secured. So I hear what you're saying. Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Laura, and I'm a senior here at the University of Houston, and I'm also speaking to you as somebody who's been held at gunpoint 1 block from here. They never found that guy. So I'm wondering how you guys are going to regulate. I'm not worried about the University of Houston students who are gun holders. I trust my fellow Cougars. I'm worried about the people off the street and how you're going to regulate. It's an open campus here at the University of Houston. So how will you regulate people who are not University of Houston students who are gun holders?
Great question. There are some campuses that require the students to wear identifications at all times on campus, faculty, staff, and students. University of Houston has been an open campus, and we have a public library in the center of the campus, which is open to anyone in the city. So some of the people who come on campus, they will not be U of H members. My officers do a lot of work that goes unseen. They deal with a lot of people who come from various neighborhoods. They make arrests, they file charges on people that people would never hear about, and they work very hard to make sure that they keep the campus safe. Again, part of this process will be for me to determine if I need more officers, and I know that I will, at least for the armories, but if I need more officers in order for the campus to feel safe. And if I need those officers, then I'll pursue that. Somebody mentioned earlier about the arming of security officers. I don't know if that's the correct method to take, but I'm considering everything to make sure that when this law goes into effect on campus, that I put the best plan in place to make it work here at U of H. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Bobby. I'm a junior here. First of all, for those of you who are not concealed carry holders or that are afraid of guns, I'm sorry for you. Not in a bad way, but myself as a concealed handgun carry holder, I don't intend to ever draw my gun, my weapon, unless my life or the people that I love are threatened. I do not wake up with that intent. So that is our intent. You know, we're told as concealed handgun license holders to de-escalate a situation. That is a last resort. You don't ever want to pull out your gun just because you're getting a fight over he stole your pen, you know? So I myself, if something happens here on campus, me having my weapon, if I'm able to protect you or myself or the people that I love, I care about, then I will do it at whatever cost. You know, I know once I draw my gun, I have to face the consequences, whether I pull the trigger or not. But we want to protect ourselves and the people we love, and we want to protect you guys as well, who can't protect yourselves. Now, I do support the no guns in the offices of the teachers. You know, science, chemical, wherever chemicals are present, you know, where the magnet is. There's different things. Yes, I support that. But to take it away from the classrooms where shootings happen, I think that's a bad idea, because if something happens there, I can be able to protect myself. And I know other concealed carriers feel the same way. So, you know, we don't have our guns to hurt you. We have our guns to protect us and you.
Hello.
Hey.
My name is Brandon Garcia. I'm a freshman here. I have a genuine question and then just a little comment. How was this law passed? Not in a negative tense, just how was it passed? Because I genuinely don't know how it was passed.
So when somebody wants to pass a new law, you'll go to it has to be a sponsor to the legislation. In this case, it was Senator Birdwell. And the sponsor will ask somebody to, you know, they'll discuss the concepts of what they want to have included. Somebody will draft that law. It will be introduced, assigned to a committee. There will be committee hearings where people hear testimony, and it will go through the legislative process, and ultimately the state legislature will vote on it.
Will there be a moment where, will there be any kind of time when we may be able to vote on it?
No. It's not where you vote for your legislators, you don't vote on the law itself.
Okay.
We elect our legislators to make that decision.
So here's what I say to you guys. Go out and vote. Go out and vote. Because I hear a lot of people here are very vocal against it and for it, but I was one of only 4 people out of 200 in my political science class who voted this election. Guys, just go out and vote. If you're for it or if you're against it, go out, but make it fair. Go out and let your opinion be heard, because it's not representative of us all if no one shows up, and we only hear from the majority of people who went. So please vote. Vote for it, vote against it, just go and vote.
Hi, my name is Brenda DeLuna. This is my second semester here. Thank you. I'm a transfer student. I want to go off on something another person said, that I do agree that it should be allowed in the classrooms to have our weapons.
Did you say should or should not?
Should, sorry about that. It should.
Should.
I transferred here from Lone Star Sci Fair. I was there the day that we had an attacker on campus. He had a knife. Our classroom and the whole campus was on lockdown for an hour and a half. We had no idea what was going on. Phones and signals got jammed. Someone got it through their message that there was a second attacker. We had really no idea and any way to contact anyone else, and it was just scary to just sit there and not know if we were next or what was going on. I do agree that we should have them. And something that another student said, just because I have a gun doesn't mean I'm going to take it out any time that I feel like I'm not going to wave it around and shoot. I pray that none of y'all have to go through something like that, and I pray that I never have to go through something like that. And I honestly would never want to use my gun, but if I have to, I will. I'm not afraid to protect myself and my students.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello. First, I want to say I appreciate the veterans that are in here that have served. I appreciate all of you. You have a monumental task. You have a monumental task. The policy is already implemented. I fully understand that. I've read the law, given a lot of thought. My name is Dr. Larry Hill. I'm a research professor here at the university. I've been here as a student, I've been here as a staff, and now as a faculty member. One thing I appreciate about the student body is its peace, its level of peace. I've never seen that at any university or any community that I've worked in. And to have a full university that's full of different backgrounds, different religions, different ethnicities, and to have this level of peace is beautiful. Now, I will say that walking across the campus late at night as a PhD student, I've had my interactions with people. And so at 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning, there's a heightened fear. People that pull triggers have an initial fear for their life, fear for their own life, or they want to protect somebody else. There's that initial fear. We hear it from the cops, from the police, or sheriffs all the time. The trigger to pull the trigger is fear for my life. I've walked across many of people, whether in the groups or one-on-one, and they fear me, whether I'm in a suit, dressed down, walking across where I park out for free, in the Third Ward. There's a fear. And so if I reach into my pocket and pull out my big phone that's big and black, my fear is being shot. Don't clap, you're taking away my time. So my fear is being shot. My fear is for other dark-skinned African Americans or other people that are marginalized, and that fear leads into 2 minutes, awesome. My fear is the trigger in that person. So when the individual was here and he mentioned that I would pop him, and he said that he had a concealed gun, did your heart rate increase? Raise your hand if your heart rate increased. I'm around guns. I own a gun. It's not on me. Don't think of me different. But when he literally said, I will pop him, my thought was when I'm walking across the campus in the middle of the night and there's a fear and a thought, will he pop me or another young person who looks like the profile that's sent out across the campus about 10, 15 times throughout the semester?
So the GCSW, Graduate College of Social Work, is a place where we hold very deep conversations about social justice, LGBT issues, marginalizations, poverty, at a level that's profound. And so my recommendation is we keep those guns clear from that, at least from that area, because I know the parameters of the policy. So thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shana Jacobs. I'm an RA on campus at Calhoun Lofts. I would suggest we don't have we don't have guns in the residential halls on campus. But if the policy gets around to it and we do end up having certain residence halls that are allowed, like maybe Calhoun Lofts or Cougar Place, places where I guess alcohol is allowed too, which is a new combo, but anyway. I would say no to the freshman dorms. I know we don't have like normal freshman dorms like UT or A&M where it's specifically labeled as freshmen, but like the Moody Towers, CVs 1 and 2, maybe even the quads, I don't know. And I know that I have a few RA friends here who would, I know that it comes along with more trainings, and I know that he asked earlier if y'all would compile a list, and you said no. So would we as RAs be able to ask our residents if they are carriers?
No.
Okay, so going into an incident, if I'm responding to an incident and I'm writing my report, is there any way I would know if I write down in the report saying this guy had a gun, I don't know if he's a holder, would y'all look at that and determine if it was legal or not?
That's a great question. If you're on the scene as an RA and there's a gun involved with that incident, then the police should be at that scene, and they would address the status of the gun. That wouldn't be your role to deal with the status of the gun.
Okay. So we as RAs are not allowed to know if they're holders or not. That's just my main question.
It's not that you're not allowed to know, it's just that you can't ask the question of whether or not they're a CHL holder. And if there's an event involving a gun, then the police should be there dealing with that issue. And if an officer tells you during the course of that, you hear during the discussion that the person was a CHL holder, that's just a byproduct of a case being investigated, but it's not that you're compiling a list of CHL holders.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
John Snyder, professor. A general observation and a couple of or 3 case histories as opposed to many of the hypotheticals that have been raised. The general observation is that I've heard so many people talk about how comfortable they are with their weapons. And that is itself, to me, frightening, terrifying, that people would be so comfortable with lethal force. The case histories bear that out. When I was a graduate assistant, longer ago than I care to calculate, I was in an exam, final exam, where there was an assault on the professor. It did not involve a deadly weapon. The professor was struck in the face with an object. Someone had slipped in a side door. It was in a recital hall, a music person, and swatted the professor and left. There were 100 or so people in the room, a little over, and the assailant was not identified. The assailant's gender was not determined. Nobody saw anything because it was over. The reaction time is that slow. So people who are comfortable with lethal force, are you sure you're going to hit what you're aiming at? Are you sure you're going to know what you should be aiming at? I don't think so.
I have a question that is potential clarification, and actually they both are. Can an event be considered a gun-free event?
Could you state your name and affiliation for us?
I apologize. Alumni of the University of Houston, Jason Burton.
Thank you.
I'm a staff member at the Moore School of Music and in the Moore's Opera House, so I get to work in a theater situation like this as well. Can an event be declared a gun-free zone even though the space that it is held in is considered an active gun zone?
In order to prohibit guns, it has to be properly noticed, so we have to put up the signs that are required by the penal code to exclude guns in that particular area. Whether or not there will be spaces that could be gun-free zones at one time and not another is still part of our discussion.
Okay. And then I was going to say vice versa. If it was a gun-free space and then an event took place, could it be declared a gun event? Second thing, and actually I thought of a third thing. After an active shooter situation, is there any protocol, there should be protocol for CHL holders to identify themselves and or make themselves known to the police so that they are not considered an active shooter? How is that going to be weeded out after it's all done? Should they put their gun away and wait until the cops get there? I mean, what would be the procedure there? And lastly, if you're talking about spaces that have children, such as the daycare and all, public spaces, you talk about the library, places that host public events where children could be attending should have some sort of consideration.
Yes.
As well, which I'm
Agreed.
surely aware of.
Yes.
Thank you.
We actually have surveyed every building on campus and talked to the building managers for each of those buildings to determine when and how often children could be present. And so that's a very good question. I'll let the chief address the second one.
The active shooter protocols will be part of the training that we afford as part of this process. Kind of a basic guideline for a CHL holder. If there's an active shooter and you see police responding and you see police running to the scene, it would probably be wise to not have your gun out at that moment. I think they talk to you about that during CHL class. They talk about the liability with each shot that you shoot. I think they teach you is $20,000 per bullet liability that you need. I think that's the number. And they talk about what happens when the police respond and you're there and your gun is out. They talk to you about the best thing for you to do is to have your gun up at that time.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Randall Mayhall, I'm a student here. I'm also a student veteran. I did 14 months in Iraq, 14 months in Afghanistan. And I don't say that for thanks. I say that so that you know, I understand the gravity of carrying a firearm. It's definitely a responsibility that I take seriously. I have no intention of ever unholstering a gun unless I consider it to be a life and death situation or to protect somebody else. I do have 2 points to make on storage. I would ask that we not have small mini satellite storages, because then a person can take a set of bolt cutters and turn it into 6 guns.
It wouldn't be unattended.
Okay.
If we have storage, it's going to be manned, it's going to be alarmed, it's going to be video. You won't get the bolt cutters and be able to get the gun out.
The other thing is, I ask that we be allowed to carry in the classroom, because honestly, I think to prohibit CHL holders from carrying in the classroom not only goes against the letter of the law, but also the spirit of the law that was passed. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Hi, my name is Chris Witt, and I'm an adjunct in supply chain logistics technology. I have some varied perspectives I'd like to share. The first is I am an adjunct. I teach at night part-time because I want to give back and I love the kids, and I think I've got something that they need. I don't do it for the money. I'm also, amen. I'm also a U.S. Marine veteran. I'm a business owner in the community, and I say that to say that I've struggled with the question that you have before you, and that as a business owner, do I allow customers and employees to carry in my facilities? And that's a tough, tough decision, and so I empathize with what you're going through. I'm also a father with a sophomore daughter in college at another state school in Texas, and a senior in high school who's looking at U of H for next year. I'm concerned about their future. I'm also an NRA certified instructor, and I've instructed hundreds of youth, both young men and women, in the proper safety and marksmanship of firearms. And I'm a CHL holder and have been for 10 years. In that 10 years, I've never once unholstered my firearm in front of another person that wasn't my family to take it out and put it into my safe. No one has ever known that I was a CHL holder. And I think there's some good reasons that I can empathize with why people would be against this law. But what you have before you is the law's passed, and you have to implement that. And so I just have a couple of points for you as you implement. I would ask that you implement to the maximum extent possible, logistically, the law. And that is in classrooms and every extent that you can on campus where it makes sense. I realize there are some specific situation with magnets and chemicals and things where that's not possible. As I've listened here tonight, I've taken notes, and I really think the people that are against implementation really fall into 3 categories for me, and I think you can do something about that. The first is fear, and it's been talked about here tonight, it's been talked about recently. There's sincere, genuine fear from the population about this law. And I would say that it's irrational, but I know they wouldn't. And so how do we react to that? I would certainly say that we need to empathize. Okay, I'm sorry. He just said I had 2 more minutes. And the second is there's a lot of misunderstanding, whether it's how CHL holders are trained or go through their training or understand the law, or the fact that freshman dorms wouldn't matter because you have to be 21 to be a CHL holder. There's lots of things that people understand, this hero complex concept. And then the third is political advocacy. And I would say I don't want to get into a political conversation, nor should you, because the law's been passed, and we just have to look at how we can legitimately implement this. I'd ask you not to give in to the fear, the misunderstanding, but to help those overcome those. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jesse Carter. I'm a student in Bauer. I just kind of want to touch base on gun-free zones. Hate to burst everyone's bubble, but they don't work and they never will. Look at Aurora. Look at the shootings at Sandy Hook. They didn't work. In a bigger state of mind, a gun-free zone attracts these people to cause these heinous crimes. They bring these people over here. People go to these zones because they know no one there will have a gun to defend themselves or anybody else. So if you create a gun-free zone, it is a magnet that will attract people like this to keep on committing these bad crimes, and that's pretty much it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is David Gratful. I'm a student at the university, and I first wanted to thank the task force for their time and their patience in listening to all of us speak. I know you have things that you'd rather be doing right now than this. And I'd like to thank everyone who's been showing up. I came to the last meeting to observe, and the turnout here, especially earlier, was much higher. So due credit to the task force for spreading the word out and getting more students involved. Showing up is half the battle, so to speak. The one question I had for the task force, and maybe to kind of clear up some, I don't know, misconceptions, or just to educate everyone, including myself, is have there been any studies done that would estimate how many individuals at a time would be at the University of Houston carrying, based on other states and colleges that have had this policy over the number of years? Is there an estimate that we can say, if we're talking about 1,000 students versus a dozen students, that makes a big difference, not only in implementation, but in maybe some of people's concerns? And if you could just address that question quickly.
Me? Okay.
Sure. Yes.
Roughly in the state of Texas, about 3% of the people over 21 years of age are CHL holders. So if you look at it at U of H, you're looking at about 21,000, 3% of that, what is that? 600, 700 students maximum at one time that would have weapons on campus. That's not counting visitors, and that's also not counting faculty. So probably the max would be, just a rough guesstimate, 2,000 people max at one time.
But you said
Was that the question?
Well,
You wanted to know how many people on campus would have guns on the basis of the numbers?
that's
and
that's a limit. I'm talking more of an average range from, have there been any studies that show, from taking sample surveys and saying, well, 1 out of every 1,000 students or 1 out of every 100 students on campus?
Yeah. I can say only anecdotally from the other states that we've studied that already have this law in place, it's not as high as anyone anticipated. So in terms of actual numbers and estimates, I can't give you that, but I can tell you anecdotally, based on the information that we've reviewed, it's certainly not as high as anybody anticipated.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Sarah Luther, and I'm a student at the Law Center. So I just want to touch really quick on a mass shooting event, which probably isn't the likely case where someone's going to unholster their weapon. But well over 90% of mass shootings occur in gun-free zones, so I would urge you to consider that any place you make a gun-free zone is going to be a target for someone who does want to cause as much pain as possible. But going to the more likely event, which is that we would be individually attacked by someone who only wants to gain some kind of benefit from us, either robbery or rape or something of that nature. You know that CHL holders are an extremely low crime group. Like someone said earlier, we're not going to unholster our weapon to shoot someone unless they're posing a threat to our lives. To the man that was worried about getting shot for pulling out his phone, I'm not going to unholster my weapon unless you are actively pursuing me or attacking me. And even then, I'm only going to do it if I wasn't able to get away from you. I'm not going to randomly pull out my gun and shoot someone. I just want to be able to protect myself. And I live in the 3rd Ward, so it sometimes is necessary, especially all of you have seen the alerts about the armed robberies at the edges of campus. Someone else talked about, there's been a lot about classrooms. I don't think there's any good reason to exclude carrying from classrooms. Someone else talked about peace and how we all come from different backgrounds and get along very well, and I've definitely seen that at the Law Center. We've had a lot of passionate discussions, and no one has ever made any indication that they were going to escalate the conversation to violence. So there's no good reason to keep it out of the classrooms. I know that anything you implement as far as making places gun-free zones is gonna add cost to my tuition, and that's definitely not something that I'd like to have, because I know you're gonna be adding staff in the places that storage is allowed. So I just would like you to consider that, because I know anywhere you make a gun-free zone is gonna add to my tuition, which is already very high. And I think that they need to be 24/7 access, because otherwise people aren't going to use them, and that defeats the purpose of being able to conceal on campus. If I can't store my firearm and get it back out when I'm ready to go home, I'm not going to use it, and if I'm not able to use that service, then I'm not going to have my firearm, and on my way home at the middle of the night, because this is finals and I'm staying on campus until midnight or later to finish my memo, it's not going to be, it doesn't make sense if I can't protect myself. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. My name is Nicholas Rojas. I'm a current student here. I have one question, and I hope y'all can provide some feedback for that. If a student who is a CHL holder, for some reason feels that they are being discriminated against by a teacher, that be lower grades or just treatment in class, which University of Houston agency or program or whatever will be responsible for investigating that and then issuing disciplinary action to the teacher if need be?
That's something we'll absolutely include in our policy. I don't actually know the answer to that yet, but it's something that we will address.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good question.
Yeah, I'm Sarah Fishman. I'm probably the one that would handle that situation. I'm a history professor and a member of the dean's office for undergraduate studies in class. And so that's the issue, is that I see, I manage and try to diffuse situations between students and faculty when they arise. And it's not that common, but it does happen. And usually when it happens to a faculty person, they have never had anything like that, have no idea what to do. But even if you train them, if it's, you know, I got trained on systems that I still can't use because I don't use them every day. So, you know, that's still going to be a problem. And also the active shooter, again, I think the situation of having a lot of people with guns out is a really bad idea. So I think that's really important to, but as far as those of you who think that it's because I distrust students, you've heard the people that talk about guns with their voices shaking. I want everybody in my class to feel free to advocate whatever position that they want. And we deal with complicated, difficult topics and feel free to discuss openly. And I want to feel free to hold those discussions without anybody having that shaking sense that somebody might have a gun. So I feel like this is a minimum is to, you know, the university is about exchange of ideas. And if we don't protect that, then I don't know what we're doing here. So that's my point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is David Temple, and I'm a graduate student in the Health and Human Performance Department. I also teach some classes there as well as a teaching assistant. So I just had a few quick questions in regards, and also suggestions for potential areas to exclude guns. One may be in areas where there would be physical activity, like certain classes where they're having to run or play basketball. I really don't think it's safe for anybody to be carrying a concealed weapon while they're have the potential to fall down and have that potentially misfire on them. So that definitely, if for those individuals that would be going to a class like that, I do think it would be great to have certain areas where they can lock away their handguns safely before they go to a class like that, or to, say, the rec center, areas where there would be physical activity.
So are you advocating that the rec center would have lockers or storage?
That, yeah, or some area close to the rec center. And I don't know that, you know, the entire rec center building needs to be, you know, gun-free. That's something that, you know, needs to be potentially discussed, but I definitely don't think that it would be safe practice to have a weapon on you while you are physically active and have the potential, you know, for it to misfire, things of that nature is my concern. The other concern, I was trying to read the Senate Bill 11 as well. I didn't see anything in there concerning alcohol in certain areas. I just tend to think that that might be any area where there is alcohol involved, if we can potentially try to limit those areas, the weapons in those areas, that may be a benefit just because of poor judgment that can come from that. Sorry. Yes.
The law on alcohol is establishments where 51% or more of the revenue comes from the alcohol sales.
So bars
guns are
essentially then.
excluded, yes, sir.
Okay, so if we're saying game day, tailgate parties, you know, are there ways to potentially, or say, you know, Hoffein's Pavilion during basketball games? I don't know if those are areas, you know, that we can think of potentially trying to limit or, you know, upping security. I don't know, whatever may need to be done. You also, I understand the idea of not wanting to make certain areas soft targets or things of that nature. But also, you know, when alcohol is involved, there's the potential for poor judgment from, you know,
Agreed.
that. And then also, I believe the law does state about preschools and things of that nature. So Melcher Gym on campus here has the charter school there. And so would that mean that that entire
Yes.
building would probably be off limits for concealed handgun license
I
holders?
don't know if it's the entirety of the building, but that's a very distinct possibility. I'm gonna have to, I can't answer
Right.
that question right now.
I mean, I work over there, so my only thing with that building, it just, so it's connected to two other buildings as
Correct.
well. So there's
Yes.
Melcher Gym, Garrison Gym, and then
Right.
Hoffein's, and then they may even connect to the new building that's
Right.
been erected there. So just all the entry and access points to Garrison Gym from Melcher Gym, you know, there's just a lot of areas that need to make sure that they're visibly displaying signage.
Correct.
Knowing that you cannot carry within this building if that's
Correct.
an issue. And you know, it also, to people's concerns of wanting to be able to carry in classes, there are several classes there that too, you know, those do need to be taken into consideration as well. So I just didn't know if there's certain, you know, if, I don't know, it just, you know.
The scope and breadth of our responsibility for signage alone has not escaped me.
Right, okay.
It's a very complicated law to implement
Yes,
for a campus of this size,
Yes, ma'am.
as well as the other campuses that actually I'm responsible for. So it's a very big deal, and one that the administration is looking at very carefully.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Those are my
Thank you, sir.
I spoke earlier, but I believe you said we could speak again if everybody else already had. And another point I wanted to bring up to emphasize is the fact that it needs to be pertinent that students who are, I guess you could essentially say, reverse commuters, as in I'm somebody who lives in the dormitory and I go into Montrose, I go into Rice Village, I go into other sections of the city, and sometimes these are late at night, coming back at 4 a.m. I need to be able to easily access my firearm from my dormitory in the event that I'm going to be doing something like this. The other point I'd like to bring up is I'd like to voice my opinion, again with my other students, is that a student needs to be able to carry their firearm in the classroom, as these do represent substantial targets for mass shooters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tabitha Aviles. I am a senior here at the University of Houston. I attend Bauer Business School, and I'm also president of a student organization here on campus. I know that the law has already been passed, but my personal beliefs, I'm not very pro-gun, but I do believe in following the law, and I feel like that's why we have security officers, that's why we have police officers, honestly, and I think I speak for a majority of the group. I don't feel comfortable with people having guns everywhere. Putting guns into the equation is automatically going to increase the chances of there being an accident. You don't have a fire if there's no lightning, if there's not a match. When you automatically put it in there, you're allowing room for mistakes to happen. A crazy person, you're just adding it to the equation. It means adding the possibility of of an accident occurring. We hear all the time about, you know, little children getting their hands on these guns, whether they were put away, that doesn't matter. The point is the gun was there, that's why the accident happened. So I also live on campus. I've lived on campus all 4 years. I do not feel comfortable with knowing that other residents have guns on campus. It makes me uneasy. I'm dating a veteran. I've gone to a shooting range with him. I've gotten some sort of gun training from him. And he's pro-gun, but I just know that with the minor training that I've had, I don't feel comfortable holding a gun. Just seeing it scares me. And I think that a lot of people feel like that. And I mean, I'm not saying I'm correct. I'm just saying that's my opinion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I already spoke already, but I did have a question. I did notice in the law that there is a fine that is attached to the law if it's broken by the university prohibiting a CHO holder from carrying a gun into a certain place.
Correct.
If a gun is displayed, intentionally, unintentionally, is there any consequence? Yes. And if so, what is it?
It depends on the circumstance. I expect the officers to exercise judgment because one thing about policing, I've learned to say, not to say never and always, because our job is full of exceptions and unusual circumstances. So I expect the officer to get to the scene, assess the situation, and then if need be, we make the arrest. And then there's a lot of latitude in the courts as far as what they find a particular individual depending on the circumstances of the case. So the judge would have a lot of latitude about what fine they would impose, the fact that the person is a student, their intentions and motives when they were involved with the situation, what brought the person to the attention of the police. So all those things would be factored in when the judge is making a decision about what fine would be assessed.
Okay. I guess, like if I pull my coat and I'm a concealed gun holder and somebody sees it, is that is that allowed? Because the reason I'm wondering is there's several individuals who have openly said that they were concealed gun holders. So they changed their perspective. So if somebody sees it, I'm just wondering what the consequence
Actually, what I would encourage you to do is go to the DPS website, and there's a lot of information there that you can see about all the rules and regulations with regard to having a concealed handgun license. There's the enabling legislation, there's frequently asked questions, and there's a lot of detail there for those kinds of answers. But the chief is right, it's going to always depend on the exact situation. That's the way the law works, is it's going to depend on the facts of the situation as they're applied. But for the general statement of the law and how those things work, that's what I would encourage you to look at.
I definitely have. I read through it pretty thoroughly, the Texas laws. One thing I'm going to mention is that extreme events like what happened in Paris. So yesterday, I'll tell you a specific incident that happened that I think would increase somebody's likelihood to pull or to at least think about pulling. I saw an individual with a knife looking at another individual, happened to be a person from the Middle East. Hat low, knife in hand. Now, I'm a social worker. I'm trained. I can diffuse a situation pretty quickly. But again, situations like that where people's stress and people's mindset is elevated after an international event. My concern for the campus is how do the trainings get implemented here after a situation like that?
That's a great question. Part of this entire process, and I mentioned it at the first event, is that my officers and security as well will have to be retrained to deal with not only how this will work from a practical standpoint, but also dealing with how people feel and their reactions to what's happening right now, because that's a factor. I was a patrol officer in the streets of Houston when there was a very difficult shooting in the city, and people responded differently to the police because of how they felt and what they perceived at the time. And the implementation of this is same or similar. People have a lot of feelings about this on both sides of the aisle, and our officers have to be wary of how people feel to make sure that they don't escalate a situation and that they're mindful of how they deal with situations and that they use good judgment.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name is Lorraine Stock. I'm a professor of English. I've taught at the University of Houston since 1976, 39 years. I've seen the University of Houston go from being Cougar High and being disparaged in the community as being it's not like Rice or anything like that, to now it being a Carnegie Tier 1 university and it's getting better all the time, and I've loved my 39 years here as a faculty member. I'm a very passionate teacher. I've won every teaching award, and sometimes twice over, that the university gives. So I'm committed to the University of Houston, but I'm against there being guns in classrooms, in dormitories, and in faculty offices, and I'll tell you why. I have 3 different anecdotes. My son was a student here, got 2 degrees at the University of Houston, very proud of those degrees. He did a very good job here. He lived for a year in the towers, and he told me the stories about things that happen in the towers: sex, drugs, and rock and roll, recreational substances, lots of close. I saw the room that he lived in with his roommate. It was smaller than a jail cell. So in close proximity, when there are guns, when there are recreational substances, which I think are very difficult to control, I think that is a recipe for disaster. That's my dormitory issue. My issue in the classroom is that I don't want to worry about having to deal with my students, having to worry, is the university going, I'm a target. A teacher, even most of my students like me, I'm very passionate about what I do, and they appreciate that. But I have had students who have not appreciated me because I'm hard and because I give low grades if they're deserved. Well, in one case, one thing I would say is that the teacher is at the front of the room, can't hide in the anonymity, okay, and is a target. I was a target in my office. I appreciate what the people who have served in the military said about their service, but I had a student who, I had a conference with him about his plagiarizing his paper, and I was going to fail him for the course. We had a conference in my office. He told me, sort of subtly, but not so subtly, that he had served in the military, and he knew how to shoot people. He knew how to kill people. And that was a not so subtle pressure on me to not fail him for the course. Frankly, he scared me. I have colleagues in my department who have been stalked by students. It's not the norm, but it happens, and I am terrified at the idea. The other thing is, having to do with Tier 1, I think it'll be much more difficult to recruit Tier 1 world-class faculty if they know that they're coming into a situation where they're dealing with guns in the classroom and their offices.
Thank you, ma'am.
So
I
maybe
know people want to
sin-
get out
yeah.
of here. and
Last question, everyone.
Yeah, this, I think, is going to be the last question, and I think we have not heard from this woman,
Yes,
so we're going to
yeah,
let her
thank
be
you.
our closer.
Thank you, I appreciate it, and it's nice to be the last question. I wanted to say my name is Tara Kelly, and I'm a full-time attorney, but I also teach an adjunct class over at the Law Center. I teach a class on negotiation and problem solving where students do a lot of interactive role play around conflicts. And so I do have a concern about having, guns in the classroom. I would say, like many faculty, I obviously don't teach because of the money. I do it because I care about the students. Obviously, we don't make enough money for that to be a rationale. And I also have the benefit of working at a company where there are no guns at our company at all. And for those of you who think that makes it a target, it doesn't at all. In fact, we're very, very safe. One thing I would say is that where people have said, I'm concerned about students attacking me, I'm also concerned about students getting into altercations with each other in the classroom. Where I have seen it is students becoming very volatile and emotional during these heated discussions in class and stalking out, even dropping the class because they were so upset. And so that did cause me some concern. So I would say, as a lawyer in a courtroom, we don't allow weapons for that reason. So I would say we shouldn't allow them in our law school classroom as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll close by saying that there will be more forums, and we do not have a set date for any forums. Certainly, there may be one more before we complete a draft policy. There certainly will be more forums after we have a draft for additional comment and consideration, and I encourage you to look at our website for more information. And if you have written comments, there is a email address on our website that you can write to. So, thank you.